talking about therapy and mental health on a first date is fine.
I have anxiety, depression, OCD, BPD, FOMO, and social anxiety.
And these are very important questions to consider before you continue your relationship with somebody that's in therapy or on prescription drugs. Hello, happy people, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Contemporary Happiness Podcast, the podcast where we discuss the art and science of modern joy. In today's podcast, we're going to be talking about dating while you are in therapy or on prescription drugs. So the question is, should you date somebody while they are in therapy, or should you be dating other people while you're in therapy? Now, I'll give you the quick rundown here. In my opinion, no, you should not date somebody seriously if they are in therapy or they're on prescription medication. But let's talk about the reasons why. While I was doing research for this podcast, naturally, I Googled the question, should I date somebody while they're in therapy? And I came across a lot of articles that essentially championed therapy, and they talk about the good things about therapy. And of course, they are quoting psychotherapists and various other therapists in the article. So the articles that I discovered were mostly pro-therapy. Right now, of course, we all know that there is almost a therapy pandemic happening right now in the United States, where I think people are misusing therapy and misusing or abusing prescription drugs. And so a lot of the articles that I saw online were pro-therapy and kind of favored somebody dating somebody who's in therapy. What I think is important to realize is why someone goes to therapy. A lot of people, I think, are pro-therapy, and they understand that, being aware of mental health is a good thing. And working on your quote-unquote past baggage is a good thing. So I'm personally for therapy. If you think that you need therapy, then you should be seeing a therapist. But you have to understand that when you are in therapy, when someone is in therapy, they are doing work, right? They're working on themselves, right? They're in a period of self-improvement, so to speak. And it's a sensitive period. It's a period where it may be difficult for them to make long-term commitments. It may be difficult for them to make major life decisions, right? Like, for example, the decision to marry someone, right? Are you really in a good state of mind while you're in therapy to make such a life-changing decision of whether or not to get married, or whether or not to have children, for example, or even whether or not to commit to a long-term relationship? Are you in a good state of mind? Is that person in a good state of mind? Legally speaking, are they competent to make these decisions? I got to say that, in my opinion, they're probably not. Being in therapy means that you're working on self-improvement. You're working on releasing excess baggage, for example, right? You're working on improving your happiness. You're working on self-love and self-awareness, right? For example, while you're working on these things, your life is a little bit kind of like under construction, right? Kind of like when you go onto a website and it says this website is currently under construction. The domain name is available, it's up there and it's being hosted, but there's nothing on the page that you can navigate because the website's under construction. Or imagine staying at a hotel overnight where the hotel is still being worked on during your stay. Do you think that your stay at the hotel will be as pleasant than after opening day, after construction is finished? So, when someone is in therapy, they're doing work, and I think it's a tremendously positive step. But it's not a good time to expect this person to make any life-altering decisions. That's why, in my opinion, it'll be very difficult, if not impossible, and certainly ill-advised to get seriously romantically involved with someone while they are in therapy and or while they're taking prescription medication. Now, of course, I think therapy has reached a kind of tipping point where a lot of people have a false reliance on their therapist or their prescription drugs, and they view therapy as a long-term kind of lifestyle versus a short-term solution. You know, people that are seeing a therapist for over 1 year, for example, what is it that you're trying to achieve? Do you think that you really need a therapist to work on your mental health for the rest of your life? Is this going to be a permanent part of your life? I don't think that's a good practice. Very few people really need a therapist for long term, because you either go to a therapist and you kind of work on your issues over a few sessions, or therapy is not working for you and you're going to have to consider some alternative methods. But you can't have it both ways, right? And I think if you're in therapy for a prolonged period of time, or you're on prescription drugs for a prolonged period of time, the question is, what are you doing? And if I'm dating somebody who's been in therapy for a very long time, that is a red flag. Being in therapy by itself is not necessarily a red flag, but being in therapy for a long time is a red flag. Now, some of the blame goes on the therapists, right? And I have, kind of dubious views on therapy culture, because I think on the one hand, therapists do very good work. On the other hand, some of them, they just want your money. They want you to come back for another session. They're going to prescribe you drugs for which they get a kickback and percentage of the profits from the pharmaceutical companies. And we're reaching an antidepressant pandemic in the United States in terms of overprescription of therapeutic drugs and over-reliance on therapy by itself. A little bit of therapy is good. Too much therapy is not good. And if you're dating somebody that when you meet them, that where they're in that therapy phase of their lives, you want to kind of assess, okay, how long have they been in therapy? How much longer do they expect to be in therapy? And these are very important questions to consider before you continue your relationship with somebody that's in therapy or on prescription drugs. There's a couple of interesting articles, like I said, that talk more about this, but I think they are more skewed to talking about the good things about therapy without referring to the bad things on therapy. Here's an article on CNBC that says 92% of adults say they prefer to date people who've been to therapy. And that's according to a survey. Now, I think the word usage there is important, because they're saying people who have been to therapy, not people who are in therapy right now. And I think somebody who's been to therapy or has worked on their mental health and is aware of having positive mental health practices in their lives, having good communication skills, releasing baggage from past trauma, things of that nature, that's a tremendous positive. You definitely want to look for somebody like that as a potential romantic partner. But someone who's in therapy is different than that. They're in the middle of it. They're in the thick of it. They're still working on achieving these goals. So again, I think it's a sensitive period of their lives, and you should be very judicious about going forward with this person on a romantic relationship, making this person commit to lifelong decisions like having children or getting married, because they're in the middle of this very important part of their life right now, working on their mental health. And again, if someone has been in therapy for a prolonged period of time, I'd say probably over 1 year, then you got some other red flags there to consider. And again, not a good basis for which you want to jump into a relationship with this person. Here's a Reddit post from 2013. This is before therapy culture became cool, so to speak, in 2013, where someone's talking about, would you consider dating someone who was regularly seeing a therapist? So that's a little bit more of a precise question, right? Talking about regularly seeing a therapist. And she says, I started seeing a therapist a couple months ago, and I'm wondering how big of a red flag this is for a lot of people, Or what is the general perception? I wouldn't put this kind of thing in my profile, like in your dating profile, for example, or even probably mention it on the first few dates. But I'm just curious what people think when they find out someone they're getting to know is in therapy. I don't have a psychiatrist and I am not on any meds, but I am seeing a therapist once a week. We'll probably continue this indefinitely. So that's a red flag, indefinitely. In a nutshell, I'm in therapy to deal with family baggage. So I feel like it's a positive thing when you know the whole story, but I also don't tell the whole story to most people, and certainly not people I've just started dating. So I think talking about therapy and mental health on a first date is fine. I think some people may think it's not a good topic to bring up on a first date. I see no problem there. In fact, you want to know, I think you have an obligation to ask the other person, what type of prescription drugs are you on? If I'm going to spend time with you, I'm going to invite you into my house, bring you around my kids, bring you around my family and friends, sleep in the same bed with you. I absolutely have a right to know what prescription drugs you're on. And I see no issue with asking that question on the first date. And again, this person here in this question, she's talking about that I'm planning on seeing a therapist indefinitely. I mean, what's the deal there? I don't think it's normal to see a therapist indefinitely. It's like seeing a cardiologist indefinitely, right? If you have heart problems, you got to fix your lifestyle. You got to do something to fix those heart problems, not just continue to see a cardiologist indefinitely. It's like having your car being in the mechanic indefinitely. Right? That's not a good thing. You take your car in for repairs and you bring it out and you drive it. And then you might take it back in again because of wear and tear. But this indefinite once a week protocol to see a therapist is just absolutely crazy, in my opinion. It's not a long-term solution, therapy. Let's summarize here in terms of the pros and cons of dating somebody who's in therapy. On the positive side, you have someone who is more in touch with their feelings. You have someone who is aware of the importance of mental health, and they're actually taking proactive steps to improve their mental health. That's a very good thing. And generally, you have somebody who is practicing and aware of emotional intelligence, which is, I think, is a tremendous positive in a relationship. But on the negative side, you have to understand that this person is in the middle of working on these things. They haven't accomplished them yet, right? They're in the middle of working on them. And it may be a very sensitive time in their lives where they're not equipped to make major life decisions. So maybe casual dating is fine, but serious long-term dating, marriage, having children with somebody who's in therapy, I think that's a huge red flag. You got to let them work out their issues first. Also, if someone's on prescription medication, you have the risk of being subjected to mood swings, right? And just volatile emotionality during the relationship. I mean, they're on prescription medications. These prescription medications are no joke. Read the side effects, right? And if you're going to be involved with someone, you're going to get involved with someone who's on prescription medication, you're going to be subjected to this type of emotional volatility, which I don't think is beneficial for any relationship. Just to kind of wrap it up here, the best practice is to date someone who's been to therapy and is open to therapy, but not someone who is in therapy right now, not someone who's on prescription drugs right now. Okay? It's similar to, let's say, dating somebody in college that has a potential to be successful once they graduate college and become a successful business person or doctor or lawyer or whatever they want to do, versus dating somebody who's already a successful professional, a doctor or a lawyer or a business person or whatever they want to do, right? It's like hiring an actor who is in acting school or hiring an actor for your movie that's won an Oscar. They've already proven that they have learned the craft, right? And that's what therapy is. It's a platform for you to become more aware of your emotions, of your mental health, and the way you think, and to release some baggage. You're in the middle of it. And I think it's a huge red flag to, date somebody while they're in it. It's like dating somebody while they are in law school. Okay. It's a difficult thing to do. Okay. I've been to law school. I've studied for the bar exam. And for me to have been dating somebody or to have gotten married during the middle of that entire situation, I mean, it would have been detrimental to my legal studies as well as to my relationship. Okay? This is not the time for you to multitask. Work on yourself, go through therapy with a kind of a finish line in mind when it comes to therapy. Be careful about your use of prescription drugs indefinitely. And if you're dating somebody, it's fine to ask them whether they are in therapy. It's fine to ask them whether they are on prescription drugs. And it's fine to end the relationship and let that person, give that person space to work on themselves. And then maybe you guys can rekindle your relationship once the person is in a better state of mind, once their therapy is not needed as much. So those are my thoughts on dating, somebody that's in therapy or on prescription drugs. Let me know what you think. Are you dating someone right now that's in therapy, or are you in therapy right now and also involved in a romantic relationship? And let me know how it's going. This is David Nima, host of the Contemporary Happiness Podcast. If you like this video, make sure to like it on YouTube and subscribe to our channel, Contemporary Happiness, on YouTube, for more insightful videos on diet, exercise, and mindset, discussing the art and science of modern joy. And I'll see you all in the next episode.